True self-love is not vanity or self-indulgence. It is the practical foundation for a capable, resilient life. Love yourself. Moore strips away cliches and shows, step by step, how to replace self-criticism with honest accountability, shame with curiosity, and avoidance with disciplined care. This book is a toolkit of daily practices, cognitive reframes, and boundary infrastructures designed to rebuild your inner authority so you can act clearly, choose wisely, and create the life your values deserve. Start here. The work is direct, the results are non-negotiable, and the payoff is freedom. Chapter 1. The practical meaning of self-love. Self-love is often framed as soft or sentimental, but its practical meaning is a series of decisions that protect your capacity to think clearly, act effectively, and build trustworthy relationships. This chapter begins by cutting through myth. Loving yourself is not indulgence, it is maintenance. The body, mind, and boundaries form a triad. When any of these fail, your capacity to show up for others and for projects erodes. The first step is measurement. Start by making a pragmatic inventory of areas where self-neglect shows up: sleep debt, chronic shame loops, messy finances, or repeated boundary violations. List concrete manifestations and their downstream costs: missed deadlines, depleted attention, angry outbursts, or persistent low mood. Once you map the damage, self-love becomes less abstract and more like necessary repair. The chapter introduces the concept of functional compassion, an orientation that balances tenderness with accountability. Functional compassion says, treat yourself with care but do not avoid hard choices. For instance, if chronic procrastination undermines your work, compassion offers a small plan and accountability rather than excuses. This chapter provides a toolbox of foundational practices that instantiate self-love daily. First, the 3 non-negotiables: a nightly wind-down ritual for sleep hygiene, a minimal movement prescription for energy and nervous system regulation, and a short daily planning practice that reduces decision friction. Each non-negotiable is deliberately small, so adherence is achievable. Success builds self-trust. Second, a compassionate audit practice. Once a week, write 3 non-judgmental facts about what drained you and 3 specific changes you will test next week. This converts passive regret into active iteration. Third, the chapter reframes language. Shift from global self-judgments to behavior-specific observations. Replace "I'm lazy" with "I missed 2 planned sessions. Here's what I will change." Language matters because it triggers different neural pathways. Accusation entrenches shame. Observation invites problem-solving. Fourth, establish boundary scaffolding. Design simple scripts for saying no and for requesting what you need, and practice them aloud. Use short formulas, appreciation, boundary, alternative, to reduce emotional load when asserting yourself. Fifth, build a repair ritual for when you fail yourself. A concise sequence: stop, breathe, note the fact without story, choose one corrective action, and re-enter the day. This ritual interrupts escalation into shame and preserves momentum. The chapter ends with a philosophical pivot. Self-love is a resource you invest, not a reward you wait for. The discipline of small, consistent practices compounds into a baseline of reliability. When you can depend on yourself in small things, you expand capacity for bigger commitments. This is the pragmatic heart of loving yourself more. Practical choices that preserve your ability to contribute, experiment, and recover. Chapter 2. Know yourself. The anatomy of inner truth. Self-love dissolves quickly without accurate self-knowledge. This chapter offers a systematic method to chart your internal landscape so choices align with your real capacities and priorities. Start with temperament mapping. Identify your natural energy rhythms, social limits, and cognitive strengths. Are you someone who produces best in solitude or in dialogue? Do you need mornings for heavy cognitive tasks or evenings? Use 2 weeks of intentional observation, log energy, mood, and output in a compact daily template. The data becomes your operating manual. Next, map emotional triggers. Track situations that reliably produce shame, anger, shame, or freeze responses. Name the trigger and the early bodily clues: tight chest, shallow breath, knot in stomach, so you can intervene earlier. This is not psychoanalytic excavation, it is pattern recognition for actionable intervention. Third, inventory core values and their behavioral expressions. Values are only useful when translated into concrete choices. If autonomy is a value, what daily behavior preserves autonomy? If connection is a value, what small practices tend it? Create value contracts that convert abstract principles into negotiable actions with yourself and others. Fourth, run a capabilities audit. List skills you can rely on in pressure and skills you must develop. This audit informs where to invest limited practice time. Fifth, build a motivation map by identifying what produces durable motivation versus fleeting enthusiasm. For many people, identity-based motivations, I am a careful person, outlast external incentives. Use identity scaffolding to convert short-term tasks into long-term habit architecture. Sixth, the chapter introduces an expedient method for truth-telling conversations. The 10-minute annual review with a trusted friend or coach, structured around 3 questions. What surprised you this year about me? What patterns should I know, and what single change would make the most difference? This external mirror accelerates self-clarity. Finally, synthesize all maps into a 1-page self-manual that you keep visible. The manual includes your rhythms, triggers, values, and initial coping strategies. When choices arise, consult the manual quickly. This reduces emotional impulsivity and increases alignment. The result of this disciplined self-knowledge is not perfection. It is pragmatic alignment. You stop fighting your nature and start designing around it, which is a core expression of loving yourself more. Chapter 3. Boundaries as acts of love. Boundaries are the skeleton of self-respect. Without them, energy bleeds away and resentment builds. This chapter strips the moral fog around boundaries and treats them as functional tools for preserving psychological and material space. Begin with a brief taxonomy: time boundaries, emotional boundaries, financial boundaries, and digital boundaries. For each category, identify one high-leverage boundary you can install immediately: an end-of-day cutoff for work email, a limit on lending money, a no phones at dinner rule, or a refusal to engage with gossip. The chapter provides practical scripts and experiments to deploy boundaries without drama. Use the soft assert formula. Acknowledge, state boundary, offer alternative, and a follow-through rule. If the boundary is violated, immediately execute a predetermined consequence that is neither punitive nor punitive in tone, but firm and proportional. For example, if colleagues continue to schedule meetings in your protected deep work block, enforce a standard response: "I'm unavailable then. Please reschedule or provide an agenda and I'll prepare a short, written reply." Clarity prevents escalation. The chapter also addresses emotional boundaries, how to refuse emotional labor when you are depleted. Practice phrases such as, "I can't give that right now. Can we schedule time when I can be present?" This protects both parties from half-hearted engagement. Financial boundaries get concrete policy examples, automatic savings transfers, a small discretionary fund, and an agreed-upon lending limit, so generosity does not become exploitation. Digital boundaries include immediate friction tactics, logout routines, notification pruning, and a weekly social media fast to stop endless consumption. The chapter emphasizes that boundary enforcement is not one time, it is ongoing calibration. Keep a boundary log where you note attempts, responses, and outcomes. Over time, you refine the scripts that work. Finally, the moral argument: boundaries are not rejections of others, but affirmations of self. They make your participation in relationships sustainable. When you protect your limits, you preserve the capacity to be generous in ways you actually mean. This is a central, counterintuitive expression of self-love, loving oneself enough to refuse depletion so one can offer presence from abundance. Chapter 4. Healing the Inner Critic. Practices to shift the voice. The inner critic is often the single largest barrier to self-love. It disguises itself as realism or moral rigor, but functions as a chronic saboteur. This chapter gives a practical, voice-oriented method to weaken the critic and amplify a constructive inner coach. Begin by externalizing the critic, give it a name, and record 2 common phrases it uses. Externalization reduces fusion and allows tactical responses. Second, apply a 3-step interruption protocol whenever the critic begins. Pause, interrogate, and reposition. Pausing uses a breath to create a gap. Interrogating asks for evidence. What specific facts support that harsh claim? And repositioning offers a pragmatic alternative. Even if this is imperfect, what's the next useful step? Third, train an inner coach voice through deliberate scripting. Create short, believable phrases grounded in evidence. I learned from this. I will do one corrective thing. Rehearse these phrases daily as behavioral anchors. Fourth, track the critic's false predictions by conducting reality checks. When the critic forecasts disaster, log outcomes for a month to build data that disconfirms catastrophizing. Fifth, practice self-compassion exercises that are specific and active. Write a short note to yourself from a kind observer detailing 2 strengths and 1 small corrective action. Compassion without action can become indulgence. This practice couples warmth with accountability. Sixth, replace absolute standards with process-based criteria. Evaluate actions rather than identity. Did you follow your process? Did you implement a corrective step? This reduces global shame and increases constructive iteration. Seventh, use social calibration. Share your critic patterns with a trusted friend who can give a reality-oriented counterpoint. External perspective often shrinks exaggerated inner condemnations. Eighth, design a critic timeout ritual. Step away, do a 5-minute physical reset, and return with a short checklist that focuses on immediate, doable steps. Finally, measure progress in behavioral terms, decreased avoidance, increased initiation of hard tasks, and better consistency. As the inner critic's volume declines, self-acceptance expands, and that is the practical axis upon which loving yourself more spins. Chapter 5. Rituals of Care. Daily Practices that Rebuild. Trust. Trusting yourself is the central work of self-love. Rituals are the infrastructure that produces that trust. This chapter lays out a menu of daily practices designed to be small, repeatable, and high impact so that adherence is achievable and results compound. The chapter opens with a principle: rituals must be both tiny and meaningful. Tiny to ensure execution, meaningful to produce identity change. The first ritual is the morning anchor, 5 to 10 minutes, combining hydration, movement, and a single sentence of intention. The sentence should be specific and measurable. Today, I will complete the core outline for Project X. The second ritual is a midday reset, a brief movement break, a single breath sequence, and a rapid gratitude note that focuses on one concrete thing that went well. The third ritual is the shutdown sequence, a 5-minute review, an inventory of unresolved items routed to a capture system, and a deliberate step to close mental loops. These 3 rituals create a reliable day cycle that reduces stress and preserves focus. The chapter then introduces the weekly sacred hour, 60 minutes reserved for reflection, learning, and planning. Use this hour to consolidate wins, identify experiments, and design the next week's priority scaffolding. The weekly cadence is what converts daily rituals into strategic progress. Next, incorporate restorative micro-practices that anchor nervous system balance, 2-minute progressive relaxation protocols, a short walk in natural light, or a single nourishing meal eaten slowly without screens. Each micro-practice targets physiology, which in turn stabilizes emotion and cognition. The chapter also covers social rituals, brief check-ins with close relations where you offer a specific appreciation and one concise request for support. These social anchors maintain connection without draining bandwidth. Finally, the chapter emphasizes iteration. Test rituals for 4 weeks, measure subjective energy and productivity, and prune or replace based on results. Rituals are not static commandments. They are experiments that produce trust when they work. When you consistently follow rituals that align with values and capacities, you create evidence that you can rely on yourself. This trust is the foundation of loving yourself more in practice rather than in rhetoric. Chapter 6. Repairing old wounds with practical care. Healing from past hurts is central to loving yourself more because unprocessed pain hijacks attention, colors choices, and mimics present danger where none exists. This chapter opens by reframing healing as repair work, specific, routine, and measurable, rather than an indeterminate emotional ordeal. Start with a 2-part intake, map the wound, and map its impact. In a single page, write a concise factual timeline of the event that caused the wound, dates, actions, and observable consequences. Then list how the wound shows up today: avoidance, anger, perfectionism, trust issues, procrastination. This mapping converts fuzzy suffering into a diagnostic checklist you can act upon. Next, construct a repair plan composed of 3 simultaneous tracks: regulation, narrative, and behavior. Regulation targets the nervous system. When old pain triggers you, use rapid down-regulation tools that are rehearsed before crisis: box breathing for 2 minutes, a grounding 5-4-3-2-1 sensory check, or a short sequence of progressive muscle relaxation. Practice these daily in calm moments so they become reflexes in heat. The narrative track focuses on reframing story. Translate the wound from a closed identity verdict, "I'm broken," to a process statement, "This happened, I learned X, I will test Y." Use the 3 truths exercise nightly. State 1 factual truth, 1 empathy truth, what a compassionate observer would say, and 1 action to truth, 1 small corrective you will try. The behavioral track asks for micro-rehearsal. If trust was broken, design low-risk trust experiments, 2 small commitments to a friend, and track adherence. If body shame persists, schedule 2 brief movement sessions focused only on sensation, not performance. The aim is to create new evidence that contradicts the old wound. Incorporate relational repair where possible. If a relationship can be safely renegotiated, Prepare a short script that names impact, requests change, and offers a boundary. If contact is unsafe or impossible, execute a symbolic release. Write a letter you do not send and then perform a physical closure ritual such as tearing the page and recycling it or burning it safely while stating one learning aloud. Add structural supports, weekly check-ins with a therapist, coach, or trusted friend. A small repair fund for therapy, retreats, or restorative experiences. And a resilience log documenting incremental improvements. Measure progress in behavior frequency, not mood. How many trust experiments completed, how many nights of adequate sleep, how many times you used a down-regulation tool when triggered. Finally, normalize relapse and iteration. Healing is non-linear and requires small, persistent repairs. When setbacks occur, run a short repair cycle, regulate, reframe with the 3 truths, perform a corrective action. Over months, micro-repairs compound and the old wound loses predictive power over your life choices. This pragmatic approach turns suffering into a manageable project and demonstrates the deepest proof of self-love. You actively restore your capacity to live fully. Chapter 7. Radical Acceptance and the Workable. Present acceptance is not resignation. It is the pragmatic decision to stop expending energy on what cannot be changed and instead invest that energy in what can. This chapter teaches radical acceptance as an operative habit, a daily ritual, and a decision rule for emotional economy. Begin by clarifying the distinction between immutable facts and influenceable variables. Make a 2-column list. Left column, facts you cannot change, past events, other people's choices, certain biological limits. Right column, variables you can influence, your response, your schedule, your boundaries, skill acquisition. When anxiety surfaces, consult the list and force a behavioral question. Is this about a fact or an influence? If fact, enact acceptance protocols. Acknowledge the fact aloud. Allow a timed emotional process, 10 to 20 minutes of focused feeling, then choose one influenceable step you can take next. If influenceable, skip the prolonged feeling and move directly to a micro-action. Next, practice an acceptance ritual twice daily. Sit for 5 minutes and name 3 things that are true right now without adding interpretation. The simple act of factual labeling reduces cognitive fusion and amygdala-driven escalation. Another key practice is reframing expectations. Replace should language with prefer language to reduce moralized rigidity. I prefer to finish this today rather than I should finish this today. This tiny linguistic shift opens adaptive choice. The chapter also covers the social dimension. Accept people as they are while holding clear boundaries. Use scripts that combine empathy and limits. I understand this is important to you and I cannot take that on right now. Here is what I can do. Radical acceptance also extends to the body. Accept current fitness, appearance, or health baselines while committing to incremental improvements. This prevents acceptance from becoming complacency. Chapter 8. Rebuilding. Trust. With yourself and others. Trust is the currency of every meaningful relationship, and self-trust is the linchpin. This chapter provides a stepwise program to rebuild trust, starting with tiny commitments and escalating to larger ones. Self-trust rebuild begins with micro-agreements, small promises to yourself that you reliably keep. Design a 30-day micro-agreement plan of 3 non-negotiable actions: sleep 7 hours, a 20-minute focused practice, and a small financial transfer to savings. Publicly commit these to a friend and log completion each day. The social commitment amplifies follow-through through mild accountability. Next, implement a transparency ritual. Once weekly, review adherence honestly in a single line: what worked, what broke, and one tweak. This ritual trains accuracy in self-reporting and reduces avoidance. For rebuilding trust with others, use the repair framework. Acknowledge impact, propose a short corrective, and set a verification step. Verification is the crucial ingredient. Agree on a small, objective sign that progress is occurring, a weekly update email, a 15-minute check-in, and honor it. If the other party cannot meet the verification requirement, scale back engagement rather than escalate conflict. The chapter emphasizes credibility over intention. Consistent small actions matter more than grand apologies. Another important practice is trust rehearsal in low-risk contexts. Practice vulnerability with a trusted friend via structured prompts and note responses. This rebuilds social confidence gradually. Financial trust repair includes explicit rules, repayment schedules, joint budgeting tools, or a temporary mediation contract, so money disputes are converted into predictable processes. Measure rebuilding through increasing frequency of kept commitments and decreasing avoidance behaviors. Finally, cultivate trust safeguarding habits. Automatic reminders for promises, default calendar blocks for core work, and a one-page commitment manifesto that you revisit monthly. Rebuilding trust is slow but predictable. A sequence of kept micro-promises expands your reliability bandwidth and becomes the backbone of self-love lived as dependability. Chapter 9. Nourishing the body. The love-health connection. Self-love without bodily care is brittle. This chapter reframes nutrition, movement, sleep, and sensory environment as acts of love that directly improve mood, cognition, and resilience. Start with baseline stabilization. Pick one dietary habit to optimize for 30 days. Consistent protein at breakfast, removing evening sugar, or adding a daily vegetable. Small, sustainable changes beat dramatic, short-term experiments. Second, design a movement prescription that fits your life. 3 sessions weekly of moderate activity that you enjoy, plus short mobility breaks every day to interrupt sedentary states. The aim is consistent stimulus, not extreme performance. Third, sleep is non-negotiable. Create a wind-down ritual of 60 minutes free from bright screens, gentle stretching, and a brief review that parcels tomorrow's top priorities to prevent ruminative sleep loss. Track sleep quality objectively if possible, and iterate with micro changes. Fourth, attend to sensory inputs, lighting, sound, and tactile comfort. Replace harsh lighting with warmer lamps for evening. Curate calm playlists for focused work, and invest in a comfortable pillow or chair. These modest investments return daily calm. Fifth, practice pleasure-based nourishment. Savor food slowly, choose movement that feels good, and schedule pleasurable sensory experiences weekly. A bath, a nature walk, a favorite meal. Pleasure is not indulgence. It signals to the nervous system that life is safe and worth engaging. Sixth, hydration and micronutrient attention are low-friction gains. A daily glass of water on waking and a simple multivitamin aligned to dietary gaps reduce cognitive noise. Finally, create body-respecting daily rules, a minimum step target, a no-skip sleep rule, or a weekly movement buddy. Measure by simple objective markers, sleep hours, consistent workouts, number of vegetable servings, and subjective markers, energy, mood stability, and reduced reactivity. Treating your body kindly is therefore a tactical strategy for sustained self-love. When the body is fed, rested, and moved with care, the mind becomes more generous toward itself. Chapter 10. Financial self-love, stability, boundaries, and generosity. Economic stress corrodes self-esteem. Financial self-love creates stability and aligned spending that reflects values. This chapter presents a practical financial framework. Build a simple cash flow visibility system, create small buffers, and align discretionary spending with identity. Start with a single-sheet monthly snapshot showing income, fixed commitments, and flexible spending categories. Visibility reduces anxiety by converting unknowns into knowns. Next, prioritize small buffers. An emergency mini-fund of 1 to 2 weeks essentials reduces acute stress and prevents cascading decisions. Automate saving to build this buffer without constant willpower. Third, set a generosity rule, allocating a small, fixed portion of income for giving, so generosity is practiced and internalized even under constraint. Giving calibrates identity beyond consumption. Fourth, adopt clear lending policies and repayment frameworks to avoid repeated boundary erosion. Document terms in a short message and enforce them consistently. Fifth, implement value spending experiments for a month. Allocate more to one category that aligns with core values, learning, health, relationships, and less to high-noise consumption. Assess the net effect on well-being. Sixth, cultivate financial compassion. Avoid moralizing your balance sheet and instead treat mistakes as learning. Run small corrective experiments, not public punishments. Seventh, build income resilience with small diversification experiments, a weekend freelance gig, a small product trial, or skill monetization pilot, so identity and stability are not dependent on a single income source. Finally, measure by reduced emergency responses greater ability to refuse high-stress work misaligned with values and increased feelings of agency. Financial self-love is the practical commitment to create predictability and choice. 2 core conditions for feeling safe enough to nurture yourself. Chapter 11. Cultivating joy, intentional pleasure and meaning. Joy is not a byproduct of achievement. It is a practice that requires intentional scheduling and small rituals. This chapter offers a structured approach to cultivating joy that complements responsibility, micro-joys, weekly amplifiers, and seasonal celebrations. Begin with micro-joys, small, daily pleasures you prioritize regardless of productivity metrics, a 5-minute coffee ritual, a short reading break, a daily moment of humor. Track micro-joys and aim for 4 per day as baseline. Weekly amplifiers are larger, a 2-hour creative session, a dinner with a dear friend, or a nature outing. Plan these in advance so they survive busy weeks. Seasonal celebrations are quarterly rituals that mark progress, a mini retreat, a family ritual, or a small creative showcase. These larger events create narrative punctuation and anticipation. Joy also benefits from contrast. Pair demanding work blocks with intentional pleasure rewards to prevent burnout and sustain momentum. Another strategy is curiosity practice. Try one new thing each month to inoculate against habituation. Finally, integrate meaning. Connect joyful moments to values by reflecting on how each pleasure supports who you want to be. This alignment prevents joy from becoming mere distraction and makes it a form of self-respect and replenishment. Chapter 12. The Social Ecology of Self-Love, Repairing, Pruning and Planting. Relationships are ecosystems that either nourish or deplete you. This chapter teaches a triage method: repair essential relationships, prune chronic drains, and plant new nourishing ties. Begin with repair. Identify one relationship that matters and prepare a short repair script. Impact, request, verification, then test it in a low-stakes setting. Next, prune with kindness. Reduce contact with consistently draining connections using boundary scripts that protect time and energy. Pruning is not cruelty. It is resource allocation for what matters. Planting new relationships involves joining small, focused groups aligned with your values, initiating low-risk social experiments, and practicing useful curiosity to deepen early-stage connections. Social ecology management increases the likelihood that your external environment mirrors the self-love you practice internally. Chapter 13. Purposeful Presence. Practicing attention with others. Presence is the highest gift you give others and yourself. This chapter offers concrete exercises to become reliably present, single-task conversations, reflective listening drills, and brief presence checkpoints in daily routine. Practice 1. Present conversation, daily, no devices, focused eye contact, and 3 reflective questions, and measure by relational warmth and reduced social friction. Presence practiced consistently becomes a signature trait that amplifies trust, intimacy, and your sense of meaningful connection. Chapter 14. Creative Expression as Self-Revelation. Creative action reveals inner truth and integrates fragmented parts of self. This chapter encourages building a low-pressure creative practice, writing, drawing, music, or making, that serves as both exploration and proof of agency. Start with a weekly 30-minute session that is process-focused. Keep outputs private initially to reduce performance pressure. Over time, share small pieces for feedback and connection. Creative practice functions as a lab for identity exploration and a route to increased self-respect. Chapter 15. Rituals for Aging. Well, long-term self-love. Plans. Self-love matures over years. This chapter reframes long-term care as a set of evolving systems. Create a 5-year well-being plan, medical checkups scheduled, learning milestones, relationship investments, and financial targets scaled to life phases. Add a legacy element. What practices will you teach or model? So self-love extends beyond the self into generative contribution. Maintain annual reviews to adjust for changing capacities and desires. Aging well is a final expression of loving yourself across time. Planning, steady care, and compassionate adaptation ensure your future self receives the investment you could give today. Chapter 16. The Economics of Self-Care. Time, energy, and priority. Accounting, self-love operates on a simple economic truth. Your time, attention, and energy are scarce currencies that require allocation rules. When you treat self-care as an expense rather than an investment, you underfund the very capacities that allow you to fulfill obligations and pursue meaning. This chapter teaches a practical accounting system for self-care that translates abstract compassion into concrete allocations and measurable returns. Begin by mapping baseline flows. Over a 2-week period, track your waking hours in 3 buckets: obligations, work, caregiving, essential errands, upkeep, sleep, meals, hygiene, and discretionary time. Record not only minutes, but the subjective energy cost of each activity on a 1 to 5 scale. This dual metric reveals hidden drains. A 2-hour meeting may cost far more energy than an hour of solitary creative work. Next, assign a weekly self-care budget expressed in 3 units: minimum recovery hours, non-negotiable sleep and rest, recharge activities, movement, social connection, micro-joys, and resilience investments, therapy, coaching, medical appointments. Convert these into calendar commitments and protect them as firmly as mortgage payments. The chapter introduces a simple rule of thumb: the 20-30-50 allocation. At least 20% of your discretionary time should be devoted to recovery and joy, 30% to skill and growth that increase future capacity, and 50% to operational responsibilities. Adjust percentages by life phase but maintain the discipline of allocation. A key tactical approach is unit economics for decisions. Before accepting a new obligation, compute its true cost in lost self-care units over the next 6 months and weigh it against expected returns. This prevents creeping overcommitment driven by short-term emotional impulses. The chapter also covers energy arbitrage. Identify tasks that you can either outsource, automate, or reduce in frequency to free self-care bandwidth. Paying for grocery delivery, batching admin tasks to one afternoon, or delegating social logistics are examples. Another practice is the replacement test. If you remove a time block for self-care, What will fill that slot? If the replacement is passive scrolling, the test fails. Design a deliberate replacement that restores capacity. Importantly, treat self-care expenditures as investments with measurable ROI. Track metrics such as weekly focused minutes, mood stability, and error rates at work. Over 4 weeks, an increase in self-care should correlate with higher quality output and better emotional regulation. Treat this data as proof that the investment is non-negotiable. The chapter closes with negotiation scripts for setting care budgets within relationships and workplaces, clear statements that communicate need while offering practical alternatives. For example, I need uninterrupted Sunday mornings to recharge. I can take over X responsibility on Saturdays in exchange. By building time, energy, and priority accounting into daily life, self-love becomes an operational discipline that sustains performance and deepens well-being rather than an occasional indulgence. Chapter 17. The Art of Gentle Growth. Incrementalism and Ambition in Harmony. Ambition and self-love are often framed as opposites, drive versus rest, but they can be integrated through the discipline of gentle growth, the art of pursuing meaningful goals with methods that preserve dignity and reduce blow-ups. This chapter gives a blueprint for combining high ambition with tender self-care by sequencing intensity, building redundancy, and institutionalizing recovery. Start with calibrated ambition. Translate a big goal into a series of progressively harder sub-goals with explicit recovery plans between them. For each sub-goal, define a micro-deadline, a recovery window equal to at least 10 to 20% of the effort period, and a tangible non-work reward to signal completion. This pacing avoids the common pattern of sprint and collapse and turns growth into a sustainable tempo. Next, adopt a principle of redundancy. For every critical resource you depend on, time, collaborators, money, create a backup so that a single failure does not trigger existential panic. This can mean cross-training a colleague, having a small financial cushion, or building modular components in a project that can be scaled down without collapse. Redundancy reduces fear and allows you to take calculated risks, which is a compassionate form of ambition. Then use micro-progress frameworks to maintain morale. Track daily small wins and publicize them in a private accountability circle. Visible progress builds momentum and combats the self-criticism that so often accompanies long-term projects. The chapter also prescribes a specific gentle escalation rule. Never increase workload by more than 15% per week and always follow 2 consecutive increased weeks with a consolidation week at 60 to 70% intensity. This biomechanical approach to scaling prevents chronic stress accumulation and supports mastery over time. Emotional regulation techniques are integrated into the growth strategy. Scheduled worry time, rapid reappraisal scripts, and brief embodied resets ensure that ambition does not override health. Finally, reframe setbacks as information-rich feedback rather than identity-threatening failures. Conduct short post-mortems that identify one lesson, one small corrective, and one act of self-kindness. Ambition, practiced gently, produces resilience, preserves relationships, and composes progress with patience. It allows you to win without sacrificing the conditions, health, meaning, and trust that make a win worthwhile. Chapter 18. Love in Action, Ethical Living and External Alignment. Self-love extends beyond inward care. It includes living in a way that aligns actions with values so your external life supports your inner well-being. This chapter explores the moral and practical architecture of alignment, how to audit roles, relationships, and projects for ethical coherence, and how to realign them when dissonance appears. Begin with a values inventory, list core values, and for each write concrete behavioral indicators, how those values manifest in daily choices. Next, audit your major life domains, work, home, social, civic, and rate each domain on a simple scale of alignment to values. Identify high discrepancy zones for targeted intervention. The chapter advocates a principle of minimal harm paired with active contribution. Avoid choices that knowingly erode others while proactively creating small, positive impacts within your sphere. This combination stabilizes identity and reduces cognitive dissonance that can sap self-regard. Practical steps include ethical pruning, phasing out projects or relationships that consistently require compromising your values, and positive seeding, taking on one aligned micro-project that creates congruence, such as volunteering skills to a cause you care about, or redesigning work processes to reflect fairness. The chapter offers negotiation frameworks for bringing alignment into existing structures, how to request role modifications, craft purpose-aligned KPIs, or co-design team norms that reflect shared values. Financial alignment is addressed by redirecting a portion of spending or investment toward values-aligned opportunities. Even small allocations can dramatically increase the sense that money supports who you want to be. Finally, cultivate public integrity rituals, small acts like acknowledging mistakes publicly, crediting collaborators, and maintaining transparent communication that reinforce external alignment and reduce the inner moral friction that undermines self-love. When your actions reflect your ethics consistently, self-love shifts from internal rhetoric to lived coherence, producing peace and a durable sense of worth built on daily practice. Chapter 19. Cultivating a generous inner voice. Flourishing without narcissism. Self-love can be misread as narcissism, but the kind of inner generosity this book advocates is social and outward-looking. An inner voice that trusts, encourages, and then acts in service of others without self-erasure. This chapter offers practices to develop an inner voice that is firm, kind, and oriented toward contribution. Begin by distinguishing self-worth from self-importance. Worth is the steady belief in your right to care and grow. Importance is the need for external validation and hierarchy. Train your inner voice to value effort over applause and contribution over status. Use daily reflection prompts that shift focus from comparison to contribution. What did I learn today that helps others? How did I serve? This habit reframes achievements as tools for community benefit rather than trophies. Another technique is the generosity pause. Before making a competitive move or a harsh judgment, pause and ask how this choice affects others and whether a more generous option exists. Generosity-oriented decisions often produce deeper satisfaction and social capital. Incorporate gratitude practices that emphasize relational gratitude. Note not only personal blessings but how others enabled them, and then express thanks outwardly. The chapter also cautions against performative generosity. Authenticity is rooted in sustainable giving aligned with capacity. Finally, practice compassionate critique. When evaluating yourself, pair correction with an immediate plan for constructive action and an empathetic statement. This keeps growth honest without self-flagellation. A generous inner voice produces resilience, deep connections, and a motivation architecture that moves beyond ego toward purposeful contribution. This is the kind of self-love that fosters flourishing for you and those around you. Chapter 20. The Continuum of Care. Designing a Lifetime. Practice. Self-love is not a destination but a continuously maintained ecosystem. The final chapter offers a long-term framework to ensure that care, growth, and alignment persist across life's phases. Start by constructing a multi-layered plan. Daily rituals, weekly synthesis, quarterly seasons, and 5-year horizons. Map indicators of thriving for each time scale, energy and mood for daily, relationship health for weekly, strategic milestones for quarterly, and legacy markers for 5 years. Build a review cadence where you assess these indicators and make small course corrections. Embed contingencies. Life will bring illness, loss, and upheaval. Design fallback protocols, delegated responsibilities, legal and financial, safeguards, and trusted networks. So care infrastructure survives shocks. Invest in intergenerational planning, skills, financial habits, and narratives that you pass to younger people, so self-love multiplies beyond you. The chapter also discusses the role of ritual in marking life stages, ceremonies for endings, celebrations for milestones, and transitions that honor evolution. Finally, cultivate curiosity as a sustained practice. Curiosity prevents stagnation and keeps self-love adaptive rather than static. Over a lifetime, the accumulation of small choices, aligned systems, and relational investments yield depth, freedom, and meaningful legacy. Self-love, practiced across decades, becomes a force that shapes the kind of life you and others will remember. Conclusion: the quiet compulsion to care. Loving yourself more is not an indulgent project, but a practical commitment to maintain the conditions for a meaningful, productive life. It asks for discipline, small rituals, boundary enforcement, strategic rest, and it rewards with clarity, capacity, and connection. Begin with one measurable change today and defend it fiercely for 30 days. Track its impact, iterate, and slowly expand. The work is never finished, but each sustained act of care compounds into a life where you give more freely, choose more wisely, and stand by yourself as reliably as you stand by others. This is the truest victory of self-love, a life engineered to flourish, not merely to survive.